Good evening. I just got back from running a whole bunch of errands. I did Zumba earlier today, so I'm still in my workout clothes. About to go inside into my apartment in a second, but I want to say something really important. Okay, so just my car. It's like the leather on the seats. Your spiritual journey, your journey with God, the divine, however you describe it, universe, whatever you say, Jesus, Allah, Buddha, whatever it is that you choose to identify with spiritually or in any sort of religious way, is your own journey. It's so personal. I have spent a lot of my life in the Christian church in Seventh-day Adventism. Left Seventh-day Adventism because I hated the oppression that came from people who want to be different, people who want to be sexual, people who want to embrace their queerness, people who want to embrace their race, people who want to embrace the fact that they were feminine, all these different ways that people have been marginalized and categories that make people marginalized. And I remember leaving, and it was so difficult, so hard to leave. But then as years have passed, I've become so happy that I left because I really enjoy the person that I am now. I enjoy the person I've become. I enjoy the friendships I've made. I enjoy the resilience that I've kind of, I guess, adapted and developed because of the fact that I was able to leave a religion that I thought I would never leave and that I thought was the only way. Even though I had a Muslim grandfather, Christian grandmother, learned about God and love specifically from my Muslim grandfather, even though I was raised to be super Christian because my grandmother was the matriarch. Those are my parents who raised me. But after I left Seventh-day Adventism, and the thing is, intellectually I always knew this, but because of the indoctrination of all of these different religious circles, not just Adventism, but these different places, I forgot that religion was personal and for myself. I work at a church now, and the only things that I really do at that church is help the youth and be there for them, show love to the people around me, and sing about Jesus. But to me, Jesus is not the in the ways that I used to think about, oh, Jesus might be the Son of God, I must bow down, I must feel guilty, all these different things. Jesus is how I learned about love. Jesus is a word that I use to describe God. It's not the only way that I talk about God. It's not the only way that I express God. I only have a problem with the word Allah. I don't have a problem with talking about polytheistic views. I don't have a problem with using universe because to me, they all are very similar, if not the same, because for cultures, different cultures and for centuries have talked about God in very different ways. People talk about God as nature. People talk about God as Jesus. People talk about God as Allah. People talk about God as a rock. There are different things that people have done to talk about God. People talk about God as nothing. People talk about the universe and talk about God and universe as consciousness. There is no, and the thing is, we as humans will never know. None of us have gone to the cosmos, to the center. None of us were there in the beginning to figure it out. None of us were there, when things changed, because all throughout history, even when Jesus was here or any spiritual teacher, none of us of this century right now were there to know what happened. We just have stories and we have, the documentation of writing that people have passed down now to this day. And of course, over time, there have been recordings and stuff, but that's when recordings were possible. And that's a very short period when you think about how long Earth and the planets and the cosmos have been around. So the moral of this and a quick synopsis to sum this all up is to say your spiritual journey is super personal. Do not let anyone define your spiritual journey because nobody has all the answers. In this life, we all are going to gravitate to something to help us navigate through this life. For me, I am sometimes in a church. Sometimes I'm at a temple. Sometimes I'm just on a walk in nature and I don't really even talk about God. I just sit and feel the breeze. And that's how God is sometimes. This breeze, like the concept of God. I'm not talking about a supreme divine being that's looking down and everything. I'm talking about God as being in everything. I work for the United Church of Christ, and the United Church of Christ talks to me about God being involved in justice, in ways I didn't see as a Seventh-day Adventist, because Adventism is so hyper-focused on literal Bible teaching that they don't understand that the Bible is a metaphor. A lot of Adventist people don't understand the Bible is a metaphor, not a literal thing, and that we must understand that social justice and poverty and all these different things that Jesus actually talked about are what we should focus on. And that liberation was for those who are really being oppressed by the empire, the Roman Empire, that we still see the remnants and the issues of that have trickled down to modern day America. So anyways, your spiritual journey is super, super personal. It doesn't really matter what you believe as long as it's based in love. And I used to be very afraid to say this because I was afraid that, okay, I was this big leader who was traveling, who was singing, who was involved in this fairly well-known church. Seventh-day Adventism is the fastest growing denomination, knowing people from all around the country and the world. And now that I've left that, I can say very firmly, I don't care what someone believes as long as it's rooted in love, because nobody really knows what is real. That's the other thing. We think about our finite brains and how we try to categorize things in right or wrong and in gray. And I was talking to a really good friend of mine about this. And as I've grown, I've learned that there is so much gray, especially when it comes to the totality of the world, the universe, the cosmos, like the beyond that. We don't even know what time is really like. We don't even really understand gravity. We don't understand air. There's so much we don't understand. So as long as what you're doing is rooted in love, it doesn't really matter what you believe. Even if you believe nothing, because as long, in terms of like giving the divine a name, because sometimes I say the divine, sometimes I'll say God, sometimes I'll say Jesus, sometimes I'll say universe, because sometimes I really hate using the term Jesus because I don't like to put God as a male, and I don't like to categorize, I'm sorry, there are all these notifications coming on my phone. I don't like to categorize God in one little way, especially because Jesus has such a bad rep. Sometimes I say universe, and sometimes I don't like to say universe, because I like to give God more than just this conscious being, because it makes me think sometimes, well, our dreams can come true if we, call on the divine and participate in being a part of divine, being a divine being. There we go. Being a divine being, because the divine has created us, and we're creators because we were made by something bigger than us. Spirituality to me is just acknowledging that something's bigger than me and literally just resting in that thought and living life knowing that I can have what I want and I'm a part of the bigger thing. So, I don't really care what anybody believes, because I have friends of different religious paths. I have friends who are atheists. I grew up with two different religious paths. I grew up with two different religious paths and one religious path, meaning different denominations in Christianity. But then I had a Muslim grandfather, a Christian grandmother. I had friends who were atheists. I have really good friends who use universe. Some people who are my friends, my friend group, my closest friends are full of, Christian, Hindi, universe mostly, and very similar to myself. Those are my close friends. And then I have friends that are like my outside of my tight best friend circle. I have friends that are atheists. I have friends that are, that talk about the universe. They're super spiritual in the ways that they understand the tarot reading. They understand like the cosmic balance. They understand horoscopes. And there's so much to learn. And I don't want to claim that I know everything. Nobody should claim they know everything. That's really ignorant to say, well, this is what it is. I think that like I said earlier in this video, we're all going to choose some sort of path or some sort of mindset to help us to navigate this life. Doesn't mean that applies to every single person, though. So if you choose to, for example, like me choosing Christianity, I've learned a lot about love through Christ by studying the culture of that time, by understanding, like, okay, if God was a divine being that came to this earth, why would a divine being come to this earth and then be crucified? Oh, because there are people being oppressed, and there are poor people, and there are people who are marginalized, and we have this government that's super corrupt that doesn't give a shit about people. Okay, that's what we need to save people from corruption, from all these different things where people are being categorized and marginalized in a way that is unfair and doesn't help our society. And then acknowledging that there's something higher than me. Like, that's what I learned through Jesus, really. I don't necessarily believe that Jesus is the Son of God, but that helps me to navigate, because that's a story that I know. But then I also know that my grandfather taught me about Allah, talking about Muhammad. I've dated people that have taught me about Hinduism and like about the different gods and the different ways. I've dated people who have taught me about, okay, well, these are what the stars are talking about. And there's so much to know. But there's so little that we can know because we're such finite beings. We don't know everything. We're not infinite. So your religious path is personal. Don't let anyone define your path. It's super personal to you. Root everything in love and being good to the people around you and trying your best on this earth. That's all you can do.